Today, we're not talking about moving out of a house, not about changing your phone number, not about blocking a social media account. We're talking about one of the most complex and difficult inner journeys a person can go through, the journey of leaving someone who made you lose yourself without even realizing it. Someone you once believed was your soulmate, but who in reality made you doubt your intuition, erode your self-worth, and redefine love in a way that made you feel like you were never enough. Leaving a narcissist isn't a clean break. It doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't begin with one explosive argument or a dramatic turning point. It unfolds quietly deep inside you, layer by layer, in ways only those who've lived it truly understand. And today, we're going to walk through those layers together. Not just 3, not 5, but the real 7 stages of leaving a narcissist. 7 stages that don't just mark the journey of letting them go, but more importantly, the journey of returning to yourself. 1. The gut whisper. When the body knows before the mind does. Not every ache has a name. Not every manipulation starts with violence or lies. Sometimes it begins with a whisper, a vague feeling that something isn't right. You can't explain it. You have no solid proof. But every time they walk into the room, your energy sinks. When they go silent, you feel anxious. When they say, "I love you," you feel doubt instead of warmth. You ask yourself, am I just being too sensitive? No, it's not sensitivity. It's intuition. Your nervous system is quietly sounding the alarm. You're being harmed even if you can't fully see how yet. And the truth is, your body often senses what your mind isn't ready to accept. You start losing sleep for no clear reason. Your heart races unpredictably. You feel drained, depleted every time you're near them, but you chalk it up to stress work or blame yourself. Intuition doesn't shout. It whispers. And you've learned to silence those whispers because you love them, because you want to believe that things will get better. But deep down you know you're not overreacting. You're not making excuses. Some part of you is quietly trying to save yourself. This stage doesn't come with tears, goodbyes, or accusations. It begins with nothing more than a quiet awareness that this isn't what healthy love feels like. It's the first step, and for many it's the most important one. Because every healing journey begins when you finally stop ignoring that tiny voice that says, something's not right. 2. The conscious awakening. When you finally see and can no longer look away. Awakening doesn't happen the moment you scream, "I need to leave." It doesn't arrive like a bolt of lightning, nor does it stem from one explosive argument that sends you packing. Awakening is quieter than that. It begins when you can no longer pretend. It's when you look in the mirror and your eyes seem sunken, your smile unfamiliar, and a quiet question rises inside. Who am I, and why do I feel so lost in a relationship that's supposed to feel like home? This is the moment you start to recognize the truth, not because someone pointed it out, but because you're simply too tired to deny it anymore. You begin to recall the times they hurt you, and for the first time, you don't rush to defend them. You think of the words that broke you, and for the first time, you don't say, "They didn't mean it." You don't need anyone to confirm that you're in pain. You've known it for a long time, but this time you allow yourself to admit it. Awakening is when you begin to see the pattern, the repeated apologies followed by the same behavior, the empty promises, the cycles of hope and disappointment. You start to ask questions not just about them, but about yourself. Why am I still here? Why do I believe this is what I deserve? These questions are not easy. They tear through the fantasy you've created, the illusion of love, of who they are, of the future you once clung to so tightly. But these questions are what begin to open the door to your freedom. Your emotions in this stage are layered and intense. You feel anger for being manipulated, for being lied to, but you also feel guilt for letting it go on for so long. You feel sorrow not just because of what you're losing, but because of who you lost along the way. The version of you who once believed that love meant enduring. You feel fear of what life looks like without them. Fear of who you'll be when you're finally on your own. And yet, all of those feelings are real. They are evidence that you are waking up. Awakening isn't about taking immediate action. It's about finally seeing clearly. And once you see, you cannot unsee. You might stay a little longer. You might keep trying for a while, but something inside you has shifted. A part of you, even if it's small, has begun to pull away from the chaos. The same old tactics don't work anymore because now you recognize them as tactics. You begin to see that what you once called love was in many ways about control. That jealousy wasn't passion, it was power. That those moments of affection after they hurt you weren't proof of change, they were strategies to keep you tethered. You begin to see their actions for what they are, no longer through the lens of hope or excuses, but with the clarity of truth. And with that, you stop wanting to fix the relationship and start wanting to understand yourself. You begin to ask what you've sacrificed, how you've changed, who you've tried to become in order to be loved by them. You remember who you were before your identity was shaped by someone else's moods, needs, and approval. And that realization is both painful and liberating. You were never the problem. You were someone who loved deeply and lost themselves trying to make it work with someone who was never willing to meet you halfway. This stage might stretch over time. You may wake up and fall back asleep again and again, but every time you see things a little clearer, you move one step closer to freedom. Because once you've begun to awaken, you can't go back to sleep. You can't pretend to be blind in a story you now see with open eyes. And the truth is, you no longer want to. 3. The identity crash. When you no longer know who you are without being the one who stayed. When you begin to see the truth, it's not just the illusion of the relationship that starts to fall apart. It's you, a part of you. The part that spent so much time, effort, and emotional labor trying to keep this relationship alive suddenly doesn't know where to go anymore. You're not just losing a person. You're losing the version of yourself that survived by keeping them close. You were the peacemaker, the forgiver, the one who always gave one more chance, the one who bent, adapted, silenced your own needs, gave up sleep, joy, and boundaries, all to preserve a love that was always teetering on the edge of collapse. And now, as you begin to face what that love really cost you, a painful question arises. Who am I, if I'm no longer playing that role? This stage isn't about anger turned outward, it's an inner unraveling. You begin to ask yourself, did I truly love them, or was I addicted to being needed? You can't always tell what actions were driven by real feeling, and what was survival instinct, what was genuinely you, and what was shaped to appease someone who never truly loved you in a healthy way. You begin to feel empty, unanchored. You look back at decisions you made, times you stayed silent when you wanted to scream, times you smiled while your heart broke, and you ask yourself, who did I become just to keep them from leaving? And the devastating truth is, you stopped being yourself. In the identity crash, even the things that once brought you comfort or joy now feel strange. Hobbies you once loved don't excite you. People around you feel distant because you're no longer the same. You were the agreeable one, the accommodating one, the one who always said yes. And now even saying no makes you feel guilty because you were conditioned to believe love only existed when you erased your own needs. The pain in this stage is not loud. It's quiet, but persistent. It's the ache of realizing how much of yourself you traded for a version of love that was never equal. It's the heartbreak of knowing they never really saw you. They only saw the version of you that made their life easier. The one you molded yourself into so they wouldn't abandon you. And so, when you start to reject those roles, you feel lost, as if you're floating without any anchor, as if you're drifting in open water, no land in sight. But in that uncertainty, something else quietly begins the possibility of redefining who you are beyond their gaze, beyond their approval. You start to ask yourself, if I'm no longer the one who forgives everything, will I still be loved? That question hurts, but it's also the key to something important. Real love never requires you to destroy yourself to earn it. The identity crash isn't the end. It's a transformation. It's the moment you begin to peel back all the layers you built out of fear, out of habit, out of survival. And though you may not yet know who the next version of you will be, you are finally ready to stop living as a shadow. 4. The emotional withdrawal. When your heart quietly lets go before you ever leave. Emotional withdrawal doesn't usually begin with a breakup. It doesn't make noise. It doesn't demand attention. Most of the time, it comes quietly like a tide pulling back wave by wave until one day you realize your heart is no longer where it used to be. You're still there, still replying to messages, still making dinner. Maybe you even say, "I love you" out of habit. But inside you, something has changed. You no longer panic when they go silent. You no longer cling to every apology like it's the final lifeline in a storm. You don't believe their promises the way you once did. Not because you've stopped loving them, but because your body has begun rejecting the chaos it once had to normalize. You start to notice your chest doesn't tighten when they explode. You no longer check your phone every 3 minutes. You hear their voice, but instead of pulling you in, it pushes you away. Where there was once longing, there is quiet. Where there was hope, now there's stillness. And where there used to be a hunger for their affection, there's only one desire left: peace. But emotional withdrawal isn't numbness. It's what happens when you've felt too much for too long without safety. It's the final response of a heart that has waited, tried, and given all it could, only to be met with absence or volatility. You once believed that loving enough would fix it, that patience would be rewarded. But nothing changed. So now your heart doesn't leave with drama. It simply begins to walk away in silence. This withdrawal isn't visible to others. From the outside, you may seem the same, still there, still engaged, still loving. But internally, you've exited the stage. Not to win, not to punish, but because you no longer want to keep fighting. Each attempt to soothe, to accommodate, to forgive it chipped away at pieces of yourself. And now you've given too much to keep bleeding. The hard part is sometimes you can't even name what you're feeling. You're not crying. You're not raging, you're just empty. You don't react to the drama anymore. You don't flinch at the accusations or the fake apologies. You're not numb, you're disconnected. It's like your body has switched to emotional airplane mode just to survive the turbulence. You might still say, "I'm fine." You might still smile when needed. You might even reach out to them physically, but you feel nothing beneath your skin. And that is the clearest sign of all. Not the screaming, not the tears, but the absence of expectation. You've stopped hoping they'll change. You've stopped waiting for them to see your worth. You no longer fantasize about the version of them they promised to become. You don't try to fix the relationship because you finally see you can't save anything when you're the one drowning. Emotional withdrawal is the moment you stop speaking, stop explaining, stop defending your pain. It's when you're mid-sentence and suddenly go quiet because you know they're not really listening. It's when you sigh instead of arguing. When you choose to go to bed early rather than have one more pointless conversation. And that moment when you stop without warning, that's when they lose you for real. Not when you pack your bags, not when you block them, but when your heart stops waiting for them to understand. 5. The invisible exit. When you leave and no one even notices. Not every departure comes with a slammed door. Not everyone notices when someone starts to pull away. Some goodbyes don't come with bags packed or announcements made. Because sometimes we don't leave with our feet, we leave in silence. And that is one of the deepest kinds of departure. At this stage, you might still live under the same roof, still sit at the dinner table, still sleep in the same bed, but inside, you're already gone. You're no longer holding on. No longer hoping, no longer trying to explain why you're tired, why you're distant, why you no longer look like the person they used to know. You stop talking not because you have nothing to say, but because you no longer expect them to listen. The invisible exit doesn't happen overnight. It's the result of hundreds of disappointments, thousands of empty apologies, and too many moments when you had to suppress your truth just to keep the peace. It's the product of emotional exhaustion when your heart has already left long ago and your body simply hasn't caught up. You no longer ask, "Why are they like this?" You no longer wonder, "Did they ever truly love me?" You stop trying to prove that you deserve better treatment. Because the answers were written in their silence, in the way they dismissed your pain, in the blank stare they gave you while you were crying. You might still be functioning, going to work, cleaning the house, taking care of the kids, but emotionally, you're disconnecting from a relationship you know can't be repaired. You don't need to scream, "I'm leaving," because you've already started walking away. In every thought, in every choice, in every dream, you've quietly begun rebuilding for yourself. And strangely, they may not even notice. They believe as long as you're physically present, they're still in control. What they don't realize is that the most dangerous thing isn't your anger, it's your indifference. The invisible exit is when you no longer need them to change. You no longer need an apology. You no longer want anything from someone who has let you down too many times. You begin living for yourself quietly, but with conviction. You start thinking about a future that doesn't include them. You no longer put your life on hold waiting for them to grow up. You make plans. You journal. You read. You pour energy into things that remind you of your worth, not to prove it to anyone, but simply to reclaim it for yourself. No one can point to the exact day you left. Maybe even you can't. But there will come a moment when they lash out and you don't flinch. When they go silent and you feel relief. When they say the same old hurtful things, and this time you simply nod and walk away. That's when you've truly left. No more emotional ties, no more pain. Just a strange, unfamiliar quiet, the kind you once believed you'd never feel again. And that is why this stage terrifies the narcissist. Because once you leave in your mind, your heart, your spirit, there's nothing they can say or do, no affection, no threat that can pull you back. 6. The grief of the illusion. When you're not mourning them but who you once believed they could be, the grief you feel at this stage is unlike any ordinary breakup. It's not simply about missing someone. It's deeper, hollower, harder to define. Because the truth is, you're not mourning the person, you're mourning a dream. An illusion of love, a version of them that you piece together from fragments of hope, charm, and longing. You don't miss the lies. You don't miss the manipulation. You don't miss the control or the self-doubt they planted in you. But you do miss the way they looked at you when things were good. You miss the moments they made you feel special. You miss the rare instances where it felt like maybe, just maybe, they really did love you. You begin to realize you weren't in love with who they were. You were in love with who you believed they could become. If only you were patient enough. If only you were more forgiving. If only you held on just a little longer. You fell for potential. You fell for possibility. And that is what breaks you more than anything else. This stage is filled with questions that have no answers. Why couldn't it have been real? What did I do wrong? If I had just loved them differently, would things have changed? Your mind knows the truth, but your heart isn't ready to let go. Because letting go means accepting that the love you thought you had may never have truly existed. What makes this pain so unique is that it has no clear target. You can't fully blame them and you can't fully blame yourself. It's like mourning a movie that was never finished, a story that didn't end the way you imagined. And somewhere in that process, you have to face one of the hardest truths: the person you loved wasn't who they really were, but who you created in your mind. And the hardest part, you were so loyal to that vision, so devoted to the fantasy, that you lost pieces of yourself along the way. You believed if you just loved them enough, they would change, that you could be the one who made them better, that your love would be the turning point. But eventually you come to understand love should never be a one-sided mission to save someone else. This is the stage where your heart and mind exist in two different timelines. One sees the truth, the other clings to the what-if. And that inner split is what makes letting go feel impossible, because you're not just walking away from a person, you're letting go of the future you built in your mind. This is also the stage where you're most vulnerable to being pulled back in. One text, one sweet word, one carefully placed apology, and you feel that flicker of hope again. Because the dream isn't fully dead yet, it's gasping, and you as always want to save it. But if you're brave enough to look clearly, you'll see the dream was beautiful, but it was never real. And as painful as truth can be, nothing is more sacred than reality, even when it hurts. You cry not because they stopped loving you, but because you loved someone who never really existed. You're not grieving the relationship, you're grieving the person you thought they could become. You don't regret loving, but it hurts to realize that you gave your whole heart to a ghost. 7. The self-reclamation. When you're not just leaving them, you're leaving the version of you that endured to be loved. After all the loss, the sleepless nights, the inner spirals of self-doubt, and the unanswered questions, you arrive at a quiet yet powerful place, a place where you no longer need them to know who you are. This is not the end. This is the beginning. Not the beginning of a new relationship, but the beginning of you. At this stage, you're no longer pretending to be okay. You don't need to hold it all together anymore. You begin to live authentically, starting from the smallest things, cooking a meal just for yourself, reading a book without interruption, sleeping through the night without waking up to anxiety. You start to enjoy the silence. What once felt like loneliness now becomes sacred space for healing. Their voice no longer echoes in your mind every time you make a mistake. The voice that once judged you into submission is replaced by your own gentle whisper. It's okay. I'm still learning. You forgive yourself for staying too long, for loving too deeply, for not seeing it sooner. You stop blaming yourself for believing in the good, because now you know believing in love was never the mistake. The mistake was giving so much of yourself where respect never lived. You begin to set boundaries not to punish anyone, but to protect your own peace. You say no without guilt. You rest without apology. You no longer ask for permission to be who you are. And when you look in the mirror, you no longer see a person shattered. You see someone who's coming home to themselves more whole, more grounded. This rebirth isn't loud. It doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't come from outside validation. It comes from quiet decisions, choosing to listen to yourself over pleasing others. Choosing to hold on to your energy instead of pouring it endlessly into someone who never valued it. You stop needing to explain your story to others. You stop seeking validation from people who were never in your pain. You understand now you don't need to be understood to be real. Your worth was never up for debate. It just got buried beneath the ruins of a love that wasn't love. This stage isn't always beautiful either. Some days you'll feel strong. Other days a memory will make you cry out of nowhere. But you no longer fear those soft moments. Because now you know every emotion deserves a seat at the table, and no feeling makes you less worthy. You begin to dream again. Not dreams built around someone else, but dreams you once left behind. You want to learn something new, go somewhere, build something not to prove anything, but because you deserve a life that is more than just surviving emotional warfare. And finally, you no longer ask, do they still think about me? Because what matters now isn't what they think. It's what you believe about yourself. You are no longer the person who begged for love, no longer the one who contorted to be accepted. You are the one who stood back up, gathered the scattered pieces of your soul and said, I'm still here, and I will write the rest of this story on my own terms. Leaving a narcissist isn't one big moment. It's not a dramatic goodbye, a slammed door, or a clean break that erases the past. It's a process layered, cyclical, deeply personal. It's 7 stages, yes. But more than that, it's a reclamation, a remembering, a resurrection. You didn't just leave them. You left the patterns that silenced you, the self-blame that crushed you, the false version of love that cost you your peace. And if you're somewhere on this path right now, whether you're still whispering, something's not right, or just beginning to rebuild your sense of self, let this video be your reminder. You are not weak for staying. You are not broken for loving. And you are not lost. You are finding your way back. Healing is not linear. Some days you'll feel powerful. Others you'll feel pulled back by memory, by guilt, by longing. That's okay. That's part of it. Grief walks beside growth. Doubt walks beside clarity. But what matters is you keep walking. Because what's ahead is freedom. What's ahead is self-trust. What's ahead is the version of you that never needed to beg to be seen. You don't owe anyone the story of your suffering. You don't need to prove how much it hurt. You only need to know this: you survived something designed to erase you. And now you're writing your own ending. And that ending begins with you.